Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. Over the past few days, a flurry of political activity in North Carolina has shown just how important the state is to presidential candidates. 4 high-profile candidates, including President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump, descended on this closely contested state. The Republicans were showcased at the state's Republican convention in Greensboro. That event took on new import after federal charges against Trump were unsealed Friday. WRAL state government reporter Will Doran was part of a team of reporters covering the convention, and he joined us by phone from Greensboro right after Trump gave a 90-minute speech. Will, what a week.
Ooh, it was a doozy. I'm going to need some more coffee if the next 18 months are like this leading up to the 2024 elections.
Well, on Friday and Saturday, we caught a glimpse of what our next year and a half might look like. This is a pretty big battleground state.
Yes, absolutely. As you mentioned, obviously Biden was here, Trump was here, Ron DeSantis was here, Mike Pence was here, and that was just 2 days. North Carolina is front and center. We always are, but especially with this competitive Republican GOP primary, it's just really amplified.
Now, anytime a president comes to the area, it's a big deal. But this time, the anticipation of Trump's visit almost obscured Biden's visit on Friday, right?
Well, yes. It's not every day that a former president is charged with dozens of federal criminal charges. In fact, it has literally never happened before. That happened Friday. Trump was here Saturday. That just really built this up. It was one of his first chances to really address these accusations that federal prosecutors have launched against him. We were here. We had a big team. There were tons of national media here. This is not just a local story. This is big national news. What is Trump going to say?
So what was the mood on the ground, at the convention, among the delegates, among the GOP faithful?
Really, it was jubilant, almost a party-like atmosphere. A normal political convention where you tell people, hey, your party's, favored nominee for president is facing a ton of criminal charges. People might kind of take that a little more somber. But here, people just were not worried. We heard from a lot of people who dismissed the charges and, said, frankly, it actually energizes them to support the Trump campaign, that, they've heard him talk for years about how he is the victim of a politically motivated witch hunt. He said the same thing tonight, that, the reason that he's being charged isn't because he actually committed these crimes that prosecutors say he did, but is rather because, in his words, he is the only person who can stop the corruption in D.C., drain the swamp, and that's why people are coming after him. And people like that. People respond really well to that. We heard huge applause lines to that. And, there are huge, Trump hats, sequined outfits, signs, the whole shebang. People are still just all in on Trump. And, that backs up what we've seen in polls, too, that show most GOP voters do want him to be the party's nominee.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear more from WRAL state government reporter Will Doran about what the presidential candidates had to say at this year's North Carolina GOP convention. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Will Doran about North Carolina as a presidential battleground. He was at the NCGOP convention in Greensboro over the weekend. He joined us by phone Saturday night after a long day of speeches, including one by former President Donald Trump. Will, years ago, if a candidate were to face dozens of federal charges, they'd be toast. Their rivals would use that against them. But that doesn't seem to be the case with Trump, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Normally, this would just end your career, because not only does Trump face dozens of federal charges, like you said, there's also, we should note, dozens of state charges from a separate case in New York. So you would think that they would really twist the knife. Both Pence and DeSantis, when they had the chance, both of them were speaking before Trump, they had the chance to kind of control the narrative on that this weekend. And instead of attacking him, we saw them come to his defense. Now, they did both distinguish themselves from the president on some other things, criticize his record in other areas. They're trying to convince voters why they're the better choice to be president. But I think they sense the same mood that I was talking about earlier, where voters here are really just dismissive of the criminal charges against Trump. And they played right into that. They said, the same thing that Trump said, that this is politically motivated. It's unfair. They said, well, if Hillary Clinton was never charged in, her situation with her emails, why is Trump being charged now? They really kind of came to his defense here, which, I think would surprise some people until you see and talk to people on the ground who just, were really backing Trump. And, these are the voters that they're trying to win over.
Now, Trump and Pence have a famously strained relationship.
Yes, that is certainly an understatement, I would say.
Now, what else did the former vice president have to say? What was his pitch to voters? How is he trying to differentiate himself?
So one thing that Mike Pence talked about that nobody else talked about, not any candidates, not any delegates on the ground, nobody, was January 6th and the attack on the Capitol. And, when he was talking about that in his speech today, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. There was not big applause lines, but he said, look, this is something that needs to be said. On that day, Donald Trump asked me to choose him and his desire for power over the Constitution. I am not going to do that. I'm never going to do that. And that was his pitch to voters. He followed that up. He said, look, when you're the president, you're the commander in chief. And all of the men and women in uniform, they're swearing an oath to defend the Constitution. How can you send them into battle if you're not going to be willing to uphold that same kind of oath yourself? And so that was really his pitch to voters. Now, did it go over super well at this convention? I'm not sure. This is obviously some of the most conservative parts of the GOP are, the people who want to come to the party convention. I think he's trying to make that pitch for more of a general audience. But he was very forceful in saying that and really just did not beat around the bush at all.
And DeSantis, how did he set himself apart?
DeSantis talked about his own record in Florida. He really attacked Trump over COVID. And, he was talking about Anthony Fauci. People remember the former face of the COVID-19 lockdowns and everything. And, he was obviously Fauci worked for Trump. DeSantis was really trying to hammer Trump on that. And, he's also just, a younger candidate. A lot of the policies that DeSantis talked about and supports are pretty similar to Trump. On paper, they're not a whole lot alike. But, on the Democratic side, you've got, Biden in his 80s. You've got Trump, who's nearly 80, and DeSantis in his 40s. He kind of offers a more youthful vision of the Republican Party. And, he also talked about, look, in 2022, a lot of these U.S. Senate candidates that Trump endorsed lost, and Democrats kept control of the Senate. He said, we need to stop this culture of losing in the Republican Party. Didn't mention Trump by name, but it was pretty easy to figure out who he was talking about.
I want to switch gears here. There was a resolution that got a lot of attention, and it involved U.S. Senator Tom Tillis. Tell us about that.
Yes, so the delegates at the party here voted to censure Tillis. We were actually the first ones to report that. WRAL got the scoop, but it was a big deal. I mean, this is the senior leader of the party, the elder statesman sort of, who he led the state in the 2010 Tea Party wave when the Republicans took control of the legislature for the first time in well over 100 years. He's now serving in the Senate, so a lot of people were pretty shocked. But I talked to some Tillis critics here today who said that they believe he's gone too far to the left, particularly on two issues: immigration and gay marriage. There was the vote a few years ago when Trump was still president on border security, where Tillis had said that he was going to oppose a plan to take money from the military to fund the border wall. Now, after pushback from Republican activists, he changed his mind, did end up supporting that plan. But, they still remember that and his initial reaction to that. And then last year, Tillis worked with Democrats and Republicans to craft a bipartisan bill in the legislature that backed up codified same-sex marriage into law. And that was just a step too far for some Republicans. And they said, this is just not what our party is about. This is not part of our platform. And so they censured him. And, obviously they can't remove him from office, but this is really just kind of a shot across the bow to Tillis saying, hey, we don't like some of these more bipartisan things you're doing. You need to really stay loyal to the party ideals and know that we're watching you and know that we're upset with what you're doing up there in DC. So, that was big national news. I heard back from Tillis' campaign. He said he's never going to apologize and defends his record and, pointed to a lot of conservative credentials he has, on tax cuts, on border security, things like that. So I don't know if this will still be an issue the next time he runs for re-election in 2026, but it's a big issue right now.
Well, we had NCGOP Chairman Michael Whatley on our On the Record program over the weekend. He won re-election to the chairmanship, and he got a lot of praise from Pence and Trump. What does his election say for the party going forward?
Well, for a while there, we were actually a little unsure if he was going to win re-election to that position at all. He was being challenged from the right by John Kane, the son of the famous Raleigh real estate developer. And in the end, Michael Whatley did win about 60% of the vote. So, pretty serious challenge to his leadership. But talked to some people there who said what really swayed them in the end was just the state party's track record in the past few elections. Even though, as I just said, Republicans did face some setbacks nationally in 2022, unable to win the Senate. They won the Senate race here. And they've won every single judicial race here in both 2020 and 2022, flipping control of the Supreme Court. That's been huge for the GOP. There's just been a lot of electoral wins. And, even if you do have, this group of activists who are a little dissatisfied, with some of the directions the GOP is going in, obviously a lot dissatisfied with Senator Tom Tillis, Michael Whatley was still able to hang on to that chairmanship. And, I think speaks to the desire people have for stability, especially when, as we've been talking about, the presidential candidate that the party nominates might be facing a bunch of federal charges as he's running for president. So you need stability somewhere, and people saw that in the chairman of the party.
The 2024 election is still a long ways away. Trump's legal predicament will surely evolve. What happens next with Trump's charges?
Well, he's due in court on Tuesday. What happens then and after that is anybody's guess. We are probably expecting him to plead not guilty, since tonight we heard him very loudly declare his innocence. But, a lot of time still to go in this election. So, it's just there's a lot of moving pieces that we're going to be keeping our eyes on.
Well, we know you'll be watching. Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
That's WRAL State Government reporter Will Doran. For all of our coverage from the NCGOP convention, visit nccapital.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.